walking is one of the great exercises for people of all ages.
If there's any one physical activity that humans evolved to do, it's to walk. Walking is the way in which humans get around, get food. It's kind of fundamental to who we are as a species. Today, in the modern sort of Western world with cars and escalators and elevators and Zoom and TV and all that sort of stuff, we just don't walk very much. You know, the average sort of hunter-gatherer will take maybe 10, 15,000 steps a day. The average American before the pandemic was taking something like 4,700 and something steps a day. So a lot less than our ancestors. One of the ways which we medicalize exercise in the Western world is we think there's a certain amount you should do, right? We prescribe it. You should take 2 aspirin, you should get 8 hours of sleep, and you should walk 10,000 steps a day. You know, we like that, right? And there's nothing necessarily wrong with a goal, right? Goals can be really helpful, actually. But 10,000 steps is kind of arbitrary. The number actually came from when the first pedometer was invented in Japan before the 1960s Olympics. You know, in the boardroom, they were trying to decide what to call it. It turns out that 10,000 is a very auspicious number in Japan. And they thought it kind of sounded good. It seemed kind of reasonable, so they called it, 10,000 step monitor. and that kind of stuck. And surprisingly, it turns out that 10,000 steps isn't actually a bad goal. If you actually look at what people in non-Western societies do, 10,000 steps isn't actually that far off. So it's a perfectly reasonable goal to shoot for. But there's nothing like special about it. If you do 8,000 steps, that's fine. If you do 15,000 steps, that's fine. The important thing is to be physically active because some is better than none, and a little bit more tends to be better than that. But it's all good. There's no magical number. It's not a U-shaped curve with a bottom on it, right, where that tells you like where you should aim for. That does not exist. I mean, every culture engages in sports, right? It's a human universal. Sports are important. And they serve all kinds of functions. There's a lot of wonderful things about being on a team, and especially when you're children, you learn good sportsmanship. If somebody scores a goal on you, it's not appropriate to bash them in the face, that sort of thing. You learn hierarchies, you learn companionship, you learn how to cooperate. But some sports also have another origin. It's not coincidental that a lot of the sports, for example, in the ancient Olympics especially, were skills that were really important for warriors. Javelin throwing and chariot racing. Well, we don't do chariot racing anymore. Sprinting, wrestling, boxing, right? These are all very kind of physically demanding sports that are kind of combat related. Sports, I think, evolved also to help us learn not to be reactively aggressive. So like an instant kind of non-planned aggression. I mean, the extreme to me is tennis.
You cannot be serious!
You're not even allowed to swear when you're playing tennis.
We're not going to have a point taken away because this guy's an incompetent fool. You know that? That's what he is.
Road rage is a perfect example of reactive aggression.
I'm walking here! I'm walking here! Up yours, you son of a...
But there's also proactive aggression. When you plan something, premeditate, you work it out in advance. War is an example of a proactive aggression. Sports are also kind of proactive aggression sometimes. It's perfectly acceptable to be appropriately proactively aggressive as long as you're within the rules. And that's what humans excel at. We're better than most species at curbing reactive aggression, though we're not so often, but we are capable of extraordinary proactive aggression. Every once in a while there's a mass shooting and there's a kind of a standard reaction. Everybody says, oh my gosh, how could this person do this? I go to church with him and whatever, and just a nice person, etc. But we're confusing reactive aggression with proactive aggression. Hitler was a vegetarian, but of course one of the most proactively aggressive human beings who's ever lived. We shouldn't confuse these two different kinds of aggression. Our bodies weren't designed, they weren't engineered, they're not machines, they evolved. And so if you want to understand why our brains work the way they do, why our feet work the way they do, why we run, why our immune systems function the way they do, the only explanation for those sorts of questions is an evolutionary question. There's an old expression, nothing in biology makes sense except in the light of evolution. I would say that nothing about human behavior makes sense except in the light of culture and in anthropology. And we need to understand the cultural component to our behaviors as well.